Everyone to the LDE Center for Sustainability Circular Industry Talks. Especially welcome, of course, to today's presenter, Flora Poppelaars. Flora is a senior advisor circular economy at Partners for Innovation, and today's topic is on recycling of electronic products, but not the recycling itself. Recycling of disposed electronics is strongly limited by very low collection rates, and with her presentation on design for divestment, improving the consumer experience of e-waste collection, Flora will today focus on consumer behavior related to collection. Flora, the floor is yours.
Awesome. Thank you for the introduction. Should see my screen now.
Yeah.
Awesome. Great. Happy to be here. Thank you so much for the introduction. As you mentioned, I am a senior advisor at Partners for Innovation, which is a small consultancy of about 25 people in Amsterdam, focusing on sustainable innovation. My team is focusing on circular economy. My background is in industrial design engineering at the TU Delft. And after graduating on the design of a circular mobile phone, I got really fascinated by the fact that it's technically possible to move into a circular economy for electronics, but then that the people aspects were lacking or underexplored. So I got really passionate about it and did a whole PhD about this. And I'm furthering this research with my colleague Tim de Ruiter, but also colleagues at Fraunhofer as part of the Horizon Europe project called Increase. And my intention for today is to share the latest insights that we have from this research on how to design a valuable and effective collection solution for electronics so that we keep them at their highest value and utility over time. So focusing on the consumer perspective, and also want to make sure that you are aware of your power as a consumer, but also as a designer, engineer, and researcher in this process. So if you look at the consumption cycle, the start is really exciting because it's amazing. You purchase your new device. There's a whole unboxing experience. So it's really positive. And then when you think of the use phase, it's also very exciting because the whole interaction between you and your product have been designed for this. But then it gets to the end of use, and it's usually a bit sad, focused on the functional aspects, pretty gray, and you don't really want to think about it. So you see that this last phase of the consumption cycle is really broken off of the rest of the journey. And when you experience it, you have a lot of question marks. We're not used to thinking about these closed loops as consumers. We're unaware of a lot of different options that we have. We're uncertain of how to do this, how to go about this whole process. We're facing a lot of barriers along the way because the process has not been yet streamlined for this. But there are a lot of different options to dispense with your product in a responsible manner. Because as a lot of you, I think, know today, through the WEEE directive, producer responsibilities organizations are organizing the collection, and OEMs are organizing the collection of e-waste. And there are a lot of third parties also doing this, service providers, etc. So a lot of different options, but we can, as the consumers with difficulties finding it and going through the process, it's not as easy as the start of this consumption cycle, where if I ask you, where can you buy a vacuum cleaner, you know a ton of different options. But when I ask you, where can you dispense with your product, or your vacuum cleaner at the end of use, you know a lot less options. But consumers have this essential role because they decide where the product is going at the end of use, right? So it's important to make them a part of this transition. And for now, this has been rather underexplored. We see that this last phase of the consumption cycle, so the disposal phase, or how you want to call it, is mostly focusing on technological aspects and business aspects. And I advocate to also spend more attention on the people aspects. So what does it look like from a people perspective? as was mentioned in the title, we call this last phase of the consumption cycle divestment. And divestment refers to two different processes. One of the physical separation from the product, so the visible part of this process, and one to the mental and emotional separation from the product, which is under the surface, where you sever from the product, but more in an invisible manner. And you can, if we dive into the heads of the consumers, you can see different stages in this process that actually mirror what you can see at the purchase phase. First, you have the dilemma recognition, where people will reevaluate and reflect on whether to keep the product or end the use cycle. So maybe because it broke, or because a new product came along, or because the situation changed, your needs changed. The second stage is the search of divestment options. So ways to separate from your product. So think about selling it, donating it, bringing it to a collection point. The third stage is where you evaluate these different options and choose one, which will result in this divestment intention. So at that point, you only have the intention, but the question is, will you act upon this? Then you prepare yourself, but also the product for this separation. So for instance, if you decided that you're going to sell it on Marketplace, you need to clean it up. If it's, for instance, a mobile phone or a laptop, you need to delete all your data. You need to put it on and take a picture, etc. So through this process, also emotionally take a step back from, okay, this is not going to be my product anymore. Then hopefully you act upon your intentions. So you have this final act of physical separation where you actually sell the product or bring it to a collection solution. And at the end, hopefully you enjoy the outcomes of this whole process. So think of having more space, of having more money, having less guilt of your products laying around in your drawers, not doing anything. And you see that there's really this combination of the mental and emotional separation throughout this process, as well as the physical separation. Throughout this process, you have a lot of different influencing factors. I have a picture here of a lot of different factors. I don't have to read everything, but just some clusters. You have the product service, so PSS characteristics that play a role here. The user characteristics play a role, so think of their competences, of their economic situation. That also influences their perception on the situation, so both on the PSS, the context, the different options. So their way of perceiving obsolescence, what weighs more for them than other options. Are they aware of what is around? Obviously, the context plays a lot throughout the divestment process, and also the design of the collection channels and the other divestment options that are available to the consumers play a role. So you can see a lot of different interconnected factors. They're dynamic over time. And unfortunately, for now, we have not found a blueprint or a universal factor that comes out of this. It remains a complex problem. So unfortunately, I won't be able to give you the secret recipe. Of course, we know that awareness and financial compensation and convenience are important factors of a collection solution, but they don't get everybody to bring back their products automatically. So there's no magic formula, but we have to find different patterns that we can play around with. And it's something that we're doing in this research. So based on literature, based on interviews with brand owners, with producer responsibility organizations, through design projects, we're looking for these patterns in consumer behavior. And what are these current lessons that we have collected within this research project? First one is to use the current design for divestment research as a base. So as you've seen, there's a model, the different stages of divestments. There are some definitions. We've identified quite some processes and factors. And there are some different approaches that have been proposed in literature. So here on the right, you can see the canvas for consumer endings and offboarding made by Joe McLeod, who has 2 fantastic books about endings, helping designers and engineers to go through this process and design a valuable experience for the consumer, for the customers. There are quite some emerging tools. There's some design principles I can see here on the right are some design principles that I've developed during my PhD. So specifically for the case of mobile phones, for instance, one of them is considering the body and soul of devices, because you can play around with both the software side and the hardware. But this is quite a rather new field of research. There's no consensus on the term. I'm using divestment, but as you can see, McLeod is using endings or offboarding, and in scientific literature, you have a lot of different terms. So this field really needs to formalize quite a bit, but there's a lot of things that you can work with already. Things that you can also leverage are design methods that we know from the purchase and the use phases. So think of segmenting your consumer groups, use personas, so a representative people, profiles of people that can inspire your process, inform it, your design process. Think of neuromarketing, of ethnography, of surface safaris, really getting in the shoes of your consumers and exploring what actually happens in practice. What are the different options that they're confronted with, and what are the different barriers that I mentioned earlier. You can use co-creation sessions with designers, with consumers, to engage them as much as possible, and develop some service blueprints, as you can see here on the left. So use all these methods that are already available and that you know or may know. And really make sure that collection is an integral part of the customer journey. This is something that needs to be thought of immediately when you're developing a new product. How obviously you're going to think about how it's going to be used, how it's going to be purchased, but think about how to get it back at the end of use. And there are some positive things for companies to do this in terms of brand equity, in terms of customer retention, but really make sure that it's not an afterthought. Another insight is to actively engage consumers during the design. This is something that we learned from parties that we've interviewed. Instead of only looking at what people say, think, and do, so through interviews and through observations, they go deeper. They want to know how people feel. They want to know how they dream. So leverage generative sessions, because as you know, there's this value action gap where people say, I really want sustainable options, but they don't act upon it. So why aren't they doing this? What is in the way of the choosing and acting upon the most sustainable options? And through actively engaging people, you get to explore these different levels and understand these knowledge gaps and find new interventions. And one of the biggest things is, because, like I said, there's no universal factor to stimulate consumers to go into a clear direction. So what we see is that consumers are not rational in the way of behaving. So a specific input will not always result in a specific output, which means that we're not robots, but what can we do? And we saw that companies and organizations are really focusing on experimenting a lot. So at a small scale, develop different collection solutions and iterate their interventions to fit the targeted consumers. So it changes over time to make it as effective as possible. And this is rather in line with novel behavior change approaches. So instead of approaching consumers from a rational perspective of input output that I just mentioned, it's about looking at them from a collective perspective, really zooming out and understanding their complexities. So think of practice theory, I'll explain a bit more about that later, or complexity theory, but definitely approaches that deserve further investigating. So how to go about these design interventions, what can you do there? You can get inspired by how the practice of waste management evolved over time. So here you can see till the 17th century, we had, for instance, Regenbohmen, who were the cornerstone of the end-of-use experiences because they were collecting the resource. Yeah, it was seen as a resource because manufacturing was close to home. You knew where your products came from. It was visible. It was controllable, and citizens and consumers had a close and observable relationship with waste. They would tolerate it and they would see the usefulness and want to maximize it as a resource. But then in around the 18th and 19th century, there was a lot more urbanization. Production was moving out of cities. It was declining sanitation levels. And it was a big reevaluation of urban waste management. And slowly the responsibility of waste management moved from the households to more organized city, at a city level. And slowly but surely, at the 20th century, the production really moved out and completely moved out, but also the waste treatment moved out of sight. So think of landfilling, of incineration. These became more and more common. So this waste management was getting out of our, it was getting out of our heads. And this came with a lot of negative impacts that I won't go into, but what we can see in the last years is that we're trying to go back a little bit on actively involving consumers again in the process of, no, you really need to bring back your products at the end of use. What you can learn from these different, the evolution of the practice throughout history is leveraging practice theory that I just mentioned before. So practice is seen as a routinized behavior, where instead of only focusing on the individual, you look at how the practice is done by a collective. And there are certain aspects, so stuff, images, and skills that you can use from the practice to inspire these interventions. I won't go too far into detail, but if you have questions about it, contact me afterwards. Another place to get inspiration from is similar practices. So for instance, how is it being done in other cultures? Here, the example of Kamigatsu, specifically in Japan, where from the late 1990s, it evolved, the waste management evolved to a waste management of 45 different waste categories that are collected separately. They have a zero waste center and a store, so they're combining both the divestment phase with a purchase phase. And while it was first seen as a burden, it became the new normal, requiring a lot less effort. And it even makes residents reflect on, do I really need to buy this, these new things? Which is also an interesting process, right? Then you have, can think about waste workers in the global south, where they're a valuable part of their community, where they save materials from landfills. They help residents in seeing the value in waste as a resource and as a potential source of income, but also improve social order. And another example is separations in human life, because now we're really focusing on the separation from products. But as Joe McLeod mentioned also, we're not only avoiding endings or avoiding thinking about the endings of our products, but we're also doing the same in life. And here you can think of different separation types in the human life. So think of breakups, think of deaths, think of changing jobs. These are some things. These are some events where you can draw inspiration from, use different know-how, different meanings to inspire other types of endings. So to make this more tangible, because it's still rather abstract, I can give you a couple of examples how this can come together. One is really actively engaging members in the product's life, so not only in divestment, but throughout, during the purchase and during the use. Think of repair cafes, where people come together. You also have this importance of community, where they make the origin and the destination of products more visible, more tangible. It's something that you can physically work with. And it also enhances the sense of community, because you learn from each other, acquire new skills. And you can really think about combining not only repair in this case, but also reuse practices, collecting what happens afterwards, etc. Another example is new rituals. So in this case, this was an offboarding service, which is pretty tongue-in-cheek, having a respectful goodbye of mobile phones. So cleaning it up at the telecom provider, making a backup, really guiding you through step by step, but also reminiscing about the time that you had together, really personifying the product, and then thanking it for the years that you spent together, erasing all the data and placing it in the care of the telecom provider. So really both having guiding the consumer through this process, but also having a new ritual. Here also the leveraging inspiration from the grieving process. Personification really worked well in the design projects that we've seen up till now. So inspired by the grieving process in South Korea, where ashes are turned into beads, so turn into something beautiful out of the grieving process. Students of the TU Eindhoven worked on seeing how they could transform this process for devices into art, and also engage the community, foster the sense of community through the creation of an art piece together. So to finish our presentation, what's next? As I mentioned, we're doing a lot of different design projects. One is done with a company for electronic toothbrushes. Another one is done with a producer responsibility organization in Italy, focusing on the collection of small appliances. And the last one, or not the last one, but one of the big ones, focusing on kitchen appliance specifically for a company. And the aim is that next year we have a design guide, so a book combining all the different insights that we have on design for divestment, and making it as hands-on as possible for practitioners to adopt all these different lessons that I just mentioned that are still quite abstract, but how can you go about it in your design process? Yeah, thank you so much for listening. I hope that I made you aware of this new field of your power as a consumer, as a designer, researcher, and engineer. And if you have any would like to know more or have any questions, I have my contact information here, and also if the presentation is shared, you can click on the different articles below.
Hey,
Do you have any questions?
thanks, Flora. It's always surprising how many different aspects play a role in all these things. Yeah, we are all consumers, and some of us might also be scientists active in the area, so I expect some questions. Who can I give the floor? Let me otherwise kick off with one question. You strongly focus on the consumer, and I think that's completely justified because that's something that is underexposed. On the other hand, of course, the behavior of consumer and the design that you do are all company based. But usually the incentive of companies to do something at the end of life is very low. So how can you stimulate companies to really be active in that area without any actual incentives to them, whether it is regulations, whether it is potential earnings or brand image? How do you see that?
That's a very important question, because for now, indeed, it's mostly from a compliance perspective. They have to, but they already have these producer responsibility organizations organizing the collection and the circular processing. So there's not extra motivation to do it at an individual level. However, you can see that so some parties that we've interviewed are seeing the value in the customer retention. So making sure that, because if you integrate it to your whole process, you can see it with, for instance, some phone providers of retailers that combine the purchase of a new phone with the collection of the old phone. You can get, for instance, a discount when you bring back your old phone. So they see the value in customer retention. But you had also some companies that thought, because they were working on sustainability and because it was part of a strong part of their branding, they thought it would be very irresponsible from us to neglect this part. This is part of, we put something in the world, and we want to make sure that we are the place where the consumer can come back and bring back their products. But it is still rather abstract. It costs a lot of money. That's the most important thing, why there's so much attention and energy put on purchase, because that's the KPIs, right? You want to sell as much as possible. And when it comes to collection, well, yeah, you're not getting money out of it for now. But yeah, it's something that we really need to make more tangible. What are the benefits? Materialize them a bit more. And that's what we're trying to do through the design project. See, okay, what changes in the perspective of the companies that we're working with the examples that I just mentioned.
Yeah, you mentioned the PROs, the producer responsibility organizations, that indeed act collectively, and whereas design is an individual thing of the companies. They are responsible for the target of currently in the European Union 65% collection, which still is actually low, but we don't even get there. Do you also, in your research, connect to them and see if through them you can influence the producers and importers? And importers isn't, of course, even harder. Or might you use you have a number of examples where you see that certain design interventions work. In the end, we need scale and not just individual well-building companies doing this. So do you also try to use these findings to basically affect regulations and get to large scale disinvestment or ending or whatever you would like to call it?
Yeah, I think that's definitely something that is in the back of our minds. For now, it would be an implication later on of our research, because we are working with the PROs and with the companies individually. But that would definitely be something to advocate for and I recommend to have a larger impact and skill. Yeah, definitely.
Thanks. I see a question from Julia.
Hello, everyone. My name is Julia Fischer. I work with M2I, and I have a very short question. In order to realize circularity in this area, the use of refurbished articles needs to be more accepted. Now it's a very low level of acceptance, and I'm curious whether you can identify the way how we can increase it.
To increase the acceptance of refurbishment. I mean, it's not part of this specific research, but we have some I'm saying we, but I know that at the TU Delft there are some researchers working on this specifically from a consumer behavior perspective. So I could refer to their research. But yeah, it would be because that's more of a purchase phase question. But it would be interesting to see if we can leverage these collection solutions to make consumers more empowered about this is your product, what is going to happen afterwards. Oh, it has been refurbished. See, we kept as much value as possible in the product itself. Maybe there's something to play with around that. But I wouldn't, that's out of my the scope of my research to give recommendations on increasing the acceptance of refurbished products. But I can definitely send you some recommendations.
But do you think that would you think, Flora, that increased acceptance of refurbished products, so also familiarity with it, also would at least at that level, not the recycling level, stimulate return of products, so that there is a direct relation of acceptance of refurbishment, acquaintance with refurbished products, to disposing your own products for that purpose?
I think so. If we become a lot more active in this product life, for now, for the past decades, we're really used to buying something new and then throwing it in a linear way, and that's the way that we've been used to consuming. But it is definitely valuable to break this cycle in a lot of different manners, and having refurbished products. Having this realization that you don't need to have new products and there is life after the first use, I think really helps with engaging consumers in this product's life and seeing what is possible beyond the current linear way of doing. So yeah, I think there's definitely value in doing so.
Okay.
Thank you.
Doreen, you also have a question.
Yes, thank you for a nice presentation. I was wondering, are there any tips you could give on a product design level to promote collection?
Yeah, definitely. So the different interventions, so the design interventions that I've mentioned here are being done at a lot of different levels. So not only in the design of the collection channel, the campaign, etc., but you can also do it on the product itself or the communication, the packaging, etc. But on the product itself, for now we see on electronics, you have the wheelie bin crossed out. That for a lot of consumers is a big question mark. Okay, I'm not supposed to put it in the bin, but what am I supposed to do? So this is something that you can also engage your consumer. It can be done through the hardware, and as I said, it can also be done with the software, depending on obviously the product that you're working with. But we see that some of the designers that we're working with are definitely playing around with the design of their product, trying to trigger their consumers in thinking not only of the use of their product, but also what happens afterwards. And some of the, for my PhD, I mostly focus on mobile phones. They can kind of talk to you. They can trigger you. Okay, that would be pretty invasive. But for an example, I can see that you're looking for the next me, for the next version of your mobile phone, did you think about what you're going to do with me? Like, bring me back to a collection point, or, you know, I mean, obviously there's a way to make this less creepy, but there are ways to personify your product that they're really taking you by the hand and educating you also on what the possibilities are. Yeah, until it becomes a habit where we all know what to do with our products. But so yeah, there's some examples on the intervention that you can do on the product itself.
Nice. Will these also be in your guide, the
Yes.
examples?
Yeah,
amazing.
definitely.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions? Julia, I see your hand raised, but I don't know if it is again or still.
I think still.
I think also still. I do have one other question myself, and that's about reuse versus recycling. In our work on, say, the tangible product design, we quite strongly distinguish between design for recycling and design for repair. And we also see clearly tensions between design for repair and design for recycling, because some things that you do for repair, increasing the repairability, might hamper the recyclability and vice versa. In your case, you also address both reuse through refurbishment or second-hand sales and recycling. Whereas, of course, recycling has a much higher scale than the reuse part.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see similar tensions when you try to design for divestment?
Yeah, definitely, because like I said, some of the companies are leveraging divestment to push purchases, so getting discounts to get more products out of their stores. So there's an interesting tension there in just adopting divestment, but it's also a question that we frequently get because the increased project itself is focusing on the circular plastics transition and mostly on recycling. And the question is, do you want to get the products back mostly for recycling? And like you mentioned, it's the current focus of the infrastructure, the collection infrastructure and the circular processing infrastructure that we have, that most of the things are going to recycling that are being collected. But you want to get higher, you want to get the value and utility of the products higher, but that would need quite some extra time and steps to get there. And to see how to do that at a larger scale, at an individual at a consumer level, that's going to take quite some more time. But it's, I think, in terms of big. It's a great question I need to think more about, because I definitely know what you're mentioning about the tension between principles for design for recycling and design for repair. I really know where things are not combined going smoothly. It's a good questions to think of, if there are big differences in the way that you would come about this. I know that one of the designers that we're currently working with is focusing on the collection channel itself for a producer responsibility organization. So if you want to reuse it, you want to carefully get it back. And if you're going to recycle it, whatever, you can dump it in the big in a big box. It can be further broken down in the process. We don't care. So there's already a level of care that is a lot different in designing this collection solution. But it would be interesting to see if there are other aspects to think of.
Okay, thanks. I see a question of Gloria.
Hi, can you hear me? You cannot see me. I don't know, my camera. Okay, it's not pointing. Hi, I'm Gloria from the Technical University of Denmark. Regarding this last question, I was thinking that, I mean, of course, from a circularity perspective, reusing and refurbishing a product are better. But there was like I had the question about the environmental part, because we have so many products with so many design. But if we think to change a battery to a phone, it would mean like ordering this battery from probably manufactured in China, and because again the products are not standardized, so there is also this dilemma between what is good for like circularity, but was it actually like better in terms of CO2 emissions? Again, like if I need to change a battery or the screen, I need to order the specific piece because they are all different from each other. So I don't know if you can add something with this regard, or
I think it's definitely something that like I meant, it's really about behavior, the consumer behavior. We're not used to questioning these things, and we don't know immediately what the response is. I mean, us, I'm expecting we're all part of this bubble where we want to consume in a sustainable manner, but we don't have all the answers, and we're not going to do an LCA or a personal, whole research for every purchase we're doing in our lives. So there's definitely more guidance needed. I think it's a combination of factors, right? It's something that we need to be more aware of from the get-go. So since we're small in our education, getting to know these different solutions that are available and what is preferred from a environmental perspective. But also be guided by organizations and companies on how to weigh these different options, or maybe also by governmental agencies. I think sorry.
What should I do today as a consumer? Like, should I like recycle my phone? Should I try to refurbish it? Should I like, I mean, reusing it, of course, like as long as I can, but then like, what should I do?
From, if you look at circular economy, if you look at all the different circles that you have, the most value and utility is at the top. Or you can, I don't know if you know, the value hill is really at the top. So repair is from a circular perspective going to be the best options to prefer. That above refurbishment, above manufacturing, above recycling. So that kind of gives you a guideline as a consumer, indeed, how to go about it. But the exact quantification of which components come where, I wouldn't dare to say that. I think we have a lot more experts in the room here that could definitely give an answer to this. But yeah, as a main guideline, get the highest on the value hill. And that's from a circular perspective, but circularity and sustainability don't always overlap. So
Thank you.
thank you.
Any other questions? If that's not the case, Flora, I would like to thank you once again for a very interesting and sometimes also intriguing presentation. Looking forward to the further results. I would like to thank all others for their participation, and I hope to see you at our next Circular Industry Talks, which is in 2 weeks' time, where we will have a presentation of Mireille Rijmen from Rijkswaterstaat.
Cool.
Have a nice day.
You too. Bye.